The night my house burned to ashes, I lost everything, except my son, or so I thought. When I showed up at his door, he didn't hug me, he didn't cry. He looked me in the eye and said, "Mom, my fiancée needs her privacy." That was the moment my heart broke, and the moment my past came back. Because that same night, I called the man I hadn't seen in 40 years, and when he opened the door to his mansion, he said 5 words that changed my life forever. "You should have called me sooner." I never imagined that the smell of smoke would become the smell of my past. One moment I was standing in my kitchen pouring hot water over instant coffee, and the next, the air turned dark, thick, heavy, and alive. I heard a crackle behind me, the kind that sounds harmless until it isn't. The old wiring in the living room must have sparked again. I'd been meaning to get it fixed, but life at 65 is full of, "I'll do it tomorrow." That night, tomorrow never came. Flames spread across the curtains with a hunger that didn't belong to this world. I remember the way the fire glowed against the framed photographs. My son Mark smiling at age 8, his father holding him up at a little league game. Their faces flickered, warped, and disappeared behind heat and smoke. The sound was unbearable. Wood snapping, glass shattering, the fire roaring louder than any scream I could manage. I ran for the phone, but my hands trembled too much to dial. The heat pressed against my skin like punishment. I could barely see the front door, but I ran anyway, coughing, crying, clutching the only thing within reach, my purse. When I stumbled outside, the world looked like it was ending. The neighbors were already gathering. Mrs. Porter from next door wrapped me in a blanket that smelled like detergent and mint. The fire truck lights flashed red and blue, painting everything like a nightmare carnival. I watched my house collapse inward, 40 years of life, gone in 20 minutes. By midnight, it was over. Smoke rose from what used to be my roof, curling into the night, like ghosts refusing to leave. The fire chief told me it was an electrical short, nothing unusual. But to me, it wasn't just a short circuit. It was the end of everything I'd built. They offered to take me to a shelter. I smiled and said I had somewhere to go, though in truth I had no idea where that was. The only person left who might take me in was my son, Mark Bennett. 39 years old, successful, married soon, I'd heard. Living in a neighborhood where the lawns were greener than God intended. We hadn't spoken much these past few months, birthdays reduced to voicemails, Christmas greetings sent by text. But he was my son. Surely, when disaster struck, family still meant something. I borrowed Mrs. Porter's phone. My hands shook so badly I almost dropped it. "Mark?" A pause. Then, "Mom? It's late. What's wrong?" There was a fire. My voice cracked. "The house, it's gone. Everything's gone." The silence that followed stretched like a rubber band ready to snap. "Are you hurt?" he asked. "No, just shaken. I don't have anywhere to go tonight." Another silence then. "Of course, Mom. Come here. We'll figure something out." Relief hit me so hard I almost cried again. My boy, my only boy. By the time the taxi pulled into his neighborhood, dawn had started to push pale light across the sky. I'd never seen streets so quiet, so clean. Identical houses lined both sides, 2-story homes with identical mailboxes and identical smiles. My reflection in the taxi window looked like someone who didn't belong here. Smoke-streaked hair, puffy eyes, a cheap coat that smelled like burnt insulation. When the car stopped in front of Mark's house, I saw her through the window first. Ashley Reed, his fiancée. She was beautiful in that modern, effortless way. Sleek ponytail, silk robe, the kind of woman who always smelled like citrus and ambition. She looked startled when she saw me on the porch. Mark opened the door. "Mom," he said, relief and discomfort tangled in his tone. "You made it." Ashley appeared behind him, polite smile in place. "Nora," she said. "We're so sorry about what happened. Mark told me everything. Please come in." The house was spotless, magazine perfect, pale walls, white furniture, glass everywhere. No clutter, no warmth. Even the air smelled expensive, eucalyptus and candle wax. "I can't believe this," Mark said as he took my suitcase. "The whole house?" "Everything," I said quietly. "I didn't even save the photo albums." Ashley reached out, touching my arm lightly, just enough to say she'd fulfilled her social duty. "That's awful. You must be exhausted. Mark, show your mom the guest room." Guest room. The word lodged in my throat, but I smiled. "Thank you, dear. I'll stay just until the insurance clears things up." "Of course," Mark said, but his eyes flickered toward Ashley. Something unspoken passed between them. She led me upstairs. "It's actually my home office," she said with a laugh that didn't reach her eyes. "But we can make it work for a while." The office was small, clean, and personal. One narrow bed, a desk, a window overlooking the driveway. I placed my worn purse on the chair and stood there, listening to the sound of footsteps fade down the hallway. I should have felt grateful. Instead, I felt like an intruder. That first night, I couldn't sleep. The sheets were too soft, The air too cold, and every creak of the house reminded me I was living in someone else's story. I stared at the ceiling and thought of my husband Daniel, gone 7 years now. He'd known how to make the house feel alive. Even when money was tight, he made sure we had laughter, warmth, a reason to stay up late and talk. I wondered what he'd think of this. His wife, sleeping in her son's office like a tenant. In the morning, I woke early, out of habit. I made coffee, grateful that my hands finally had something to do. The machine was complicated, touch screens, blinking icons, but I figured it out. I found bread and eggs and started breakfast. When Ashley walked in, she froze mid-step. "Oh," she said too brightly, "you're up early." "I thought I'd make breakfast," I said. "Scrambled eggs, toast, maybe pancakes?" She smiled, a professional smile. "That's sweet. We don't really do breakfast, we're on protein shakes most mornings." She reached for a glass blender and poured something green inside. "Mark's been on this health kick lately." "I can make eggs for you too," I offered. "No, really," she said, laughing softly. "We're fine. But thank you." Mark came in moments later, freshly shaved, already in a suit. "Morning, Mom." He kissed my cheek. "You didn't have to cook." "I wanted to," I said. Ashley handed him a glass of green smoothie. "Drink this before your meeting." Then, turning to me, she added, "There's almond milk in the fridge, top shelf. Try to keep it separate from the regular dairy. I'm allergic." Her tone was polite, but it came with invisible boundaries. After they left for work, the silence felt heavy. I cleaned the kitchen, folded laundry that wasn't mine, and organized the pantry just to fill the hours. I told myself I was helping, but deep down, I think I was trying to earn my place there. When Mark came home that evening, I'd made dinner. Roast chicken, mashed potatoes, gravy. The kind of meal that used to bring him running to the table as a child. Ashley stared at the dishes. "That's a lot of food. I thought you might be hungry after work." "It smells wonderful," Mark said quickly, then hesitated when he caught Ashley's glance. "But we usually order in on Wednesdays, it's kind of our thing." "Oh." I swallowed hard. Of course. The three of us ate in uneasy silence. The clink of silverware was louder than conversation. When it was over, I washed the dishes and excused myself early. Wanted to believe this was temporary. That night, I sat by the window, staring out at the perfect street, the perfect houses, the perfect lives. I wanted to believe this was temporary, that soon I'd find another home, a small apartment somewhere quiet, where I could hang my pictures and grow my plants. But beneath that hope, something colder had begun to grow. It wasn't just the house I'd lost. It was my place in the world. I'd raised a boy who once ran to me when thunder scared him, who cried into my shoulder when his father died. Now he looked at me like a problem to solve. When the wind howled through the trees that night, it sounded like laughter, cruel and distant. I closed the curtains, lay back on the narrow bed, and whispered to the dark, "Tomorrow will be better." But deep down, I already knew, tomorrow was going to break me. Ashley opened the door before I could knock, as if she'd been listening for the rattle of my suitcase wheels on their perfect stone path. She was all clean lines and neutral tones, white blouse, slate gray leggings, a gold chain so delicate it looked like a sliver of light. Her hair was pulled into one of those casual knots that only wealthy women seem to achieve. "Nora," she said with a smile that didn't involve her eyes. "We were just finishing up lunch." I could smell lemon cleaner and roasted rosemary chicken. My stomach tightened so hard I thought I might fold. Mark appeared behind her, a half-second late. My son, broad-shouldered, handsome the way his father had been, except his jaw was clenched and his tie was still perfectly straight at 5:30. "Mom," he said, "come in." The entryway gleamed. A console table with fresh lilies, not a speck of dust, a framed engagement photo where the two of them laughed like every day was a magazine spread. I caught my reflection in their mirror. Smoke-dulled hair, cheap sweater from the emergency shelter, a red suitcase borrowed from Mrs. Porter that had a missing zipper tooth. I tried not to look like I noticed. Ashley stepped aside. "You can leave your shoes on," she said, then glanced at the floors like she hoped I wouldn't. "Thanks," I murmured, and the word came out like a scrape. We migrated to the living room in a slow choreography that already made me feel like a guest who'd stayed too long. The room was symmetrical. 2 white sofas, a glass coffee table with a hardcover book about Paris monuments, a rug so pale I was scared to breathe near it. Mark gestured to the sofa but sat in the armchair opposite, as if a coffee table were a border he couldn't cross. Ashley perched on the arm of his chair, fingers grazing his shoulder as if to anchor him to her side. I recognized the move. I'd done it with his father when we were newly married and wanted the world to know we were a unit. "So," Mark said, as if we were starting a staff meeting, "how are you feeling?" "Like I've been through a fire." I tried to smile. It didn't land. "I'm all right. The Red Cross gave me a kit. Mrs. Porter let me borrow a suitcase. I just need a place to land. A couple of weeks. A couple of weeks. Ashley repeated, trying the words on her tongue. We. She hesitated, then did what polished people do, softened the blow before delivering it. We've been adjusting to our routines. You know how it is. Early mornings, late nights, we value our privacy. I felt the first cut and did what mothers do, patched it with hope. I'll make myself invisible, I said. I can cook, clean, I won't be in your way. Mark glanced at Ashley, and they had one of those silent exchanges married people have long before they're married. He cleared his throat. Mom, of course you can stay. Just temporarily. Relief arrived so fast it made me dizzy. Thank you. Ashley's smile returned, precise as a surgeon's stitch. We'll put you in the office upstairs. It doesn't have a closet, but there's a garment rack. It'll be cozy. I nodded. Cozy is lovely. She stood. I'll show you. The office was a beautiful room that didn't belong to anyone yet. Built-ins with empty shelves, a narrow window overlooking maple trees, a desk without a scratch. She pointed to a gray love seat folded out into a narrow bed. The bedding was crisp and smelled like lavender. If you need anything, text, Ashley said. We keep the kitchen organized by zones, so please don't. She stopped herself and smiled. We'll walk through it tomorrow. Tonight, just rest. She left before I could thank her. I unpacked my whole life onto one wire rack. 3 blouses, a pair of jeans, 2 changes of underwear still stiff from the shelter's detergent. I placed Mark's childhood photo, rescued from the hall in the seconds before I ran, on the desk. He was 8, missing a front tooth, holding a baseball bat too big for him. For a moment, the office softened. Downstairs, I could hear the clink of plates, the private language of a home that wasn't mine. I woke early and tried to make myself useful. Coffee first, always coffee. In my house, I used to beat the sun with the percolator when life made sense and I could locate the cinnamon without asking anyone's permission. Here, I stood in their kitchen and stared at a chrome machine that looked more medical than domestic. Ashley walked in, athletic leggings, earbuds in, a sheen on her skin that meant she'd been running. She stopped dead. Oh, you're up. I can't sleep in strange beds, I said. Thought I'd make coffee. That's sweet, she said, which sounded like a compliment but wasn't. She slipped past me and tapped the machine. It hissed obediently. We take oat milk, the blue carton. She motioned to the fridge. And this shelf is for breakfast. This drawer is meal prep. That bin is produced for the week. We label so things don't migrate. Of course, I said. I'll keep to the corners. Don't be silly. She smiled, then moved the sugar bowl half an inch, recentered the napkin holder, aligned the mugs so their handles faced east, small things that told the truth louder than language. Mark came in and kissed her cheek. He nodded at me. Morning. I made scrambled eggs because I needed to perform a good deed, any deed, to earn my spot on that fold-out bed. I whisked with quiet efficiency, added chives, plated neatly. I set the table like I was setting out an apology. We usually don't do full breakfasts, Ashley said, friendly in the way a teacher is when you've colored outside the lines. But this looks nice. They ate, and I told myself I'd found the seam in the wall, that I could live there without tearing the paper. I was wrong. The first argument bloomed like mold, quietly, where the light didn't reach. It started with towels. I'd done a load of laundry, partly to help, partly to wash the smell of smoke out of my hair. I folded their towels the way my mother taught me, thirds lengthwise, then in half, thick roll, ends hidden. I stacked them in the linen closet and felt absurdly proud. That evening, Ashley stood in the hallway, the closet door open. Nora? Yes? We fold towels in halves here. It saves space. She smiled to soften it. Just a system thing. Of course, I said, cheeks stinging like I'd been slapped. I refolded them while she watched, a performance I'd never auditioned for. Later, it was the dishwasher. We load plates this way, she said gently, bowls face inward. Then it was the spices I reordered alphabetically to be helpful. We keep them by cuisine, not letter, she said. It's just how my brain works. Death by 1,000 perfect cuts. Mark noticed none of it until he did. On day 5, I set a stew on the stove. Beef, carrots, onions, red wine. The house filled with the smell of a life I used to have. He came home, loosened his tie, and for a minute he was 8 again. Smells incredible, Mom. It'll be ready in 10. Ashley stood at the island, measuring tahini into a blender. I had planned salmon bowls, she said, not angry, just rearranged. I marinated since this morning. I can freeze the stew, I said quickly. We'll eat it tomorrow. She smiled a little too brightly. We don't really do red meat. Mark saw my face. Something flickered in his. He took a breath, long enough to choose a side. We'll do salmon, Mom, he said. We're trying to keep a routine. I nodded and ladled the stew into containers with hands that shook. I labeled them Nora, freezer, because I'd learned the rules of this country. Claim your small portion of land and don't trespass. That night, on the narrow bed, I stared at the ceiling and told myself I was lucky. Lucky to have a roof, lucky my lungs were clear, lucky that grief could fit in a Tupperware. On day 7, I heard them. The office was above the living room. Sound floated up in clean pieces, no muffled edges in a house with perfect drywall. I didn't mean to eavesdrop. The words found me anyway. She's sweet, Ashley said, soft enough to pass for kindness. But this isn't sustainable. She lost her house, Mark said. It's temporary. How temporary? A pause. Glass clinked. We're not ready to be caretakers. We're planning a wedding. You're on the road 2 weeks next month. I can't manage this alone. She makes dinners. She remade my grocery list, Ashley said, almost laughing. She reorganized my spice rack. That's not a crime. It's a boundary, she said. And there it was, the therapy word of the decade, heavy as a gavel. If we don't set it now, we'll never get it back. Silence. Then Mark, quieter. What do you want me to do? She needs her own place, Ashley said. An extended stay. I'll help her find one near the mall. It's safe. She'll have a kitchenette. She'll feel independent. Independent. The word curdled in my throat. Independence is a luxury you can afford when you have options. I sat on the edge of the fold-out and put my hands flat on my knees until the shaking traveled into the mattress instead of outward where they could see it. 10 minutes later, there was a knock on the doorframe. Mark didn't come in, just leaned there like a man who wanted to run away from the words out of his own mouth. Hey, Mom. Hey, baby. I promised myself I'd stop calling him that, but old habits reach for you in the dark. He came in and shut the door like something dangerous lived in the hallway. He sat on the desk chair where his 8-year-old photo watched us both. We've been talking, he began, and I wanted to tell him to stop. Please, stop. Tell me about your day instead. Tell me your printer jammed or your boss mixed up the Q3 deck. Tell me anything ordinary so I can pretend my life isn't about to shrink again. We love you, he said. We want you to be comfortable, but this house, he ran a hand through his hair. It's our sanctuary. I smiled. It felt like it belonged to someone else's face. Of course it is. Ashley found some really great extended stay places, he said, relieved to have a script. They're safe, clean, full kitchenettes. How much? I asked. He blinked. We'll help. How much, Mark? A couple hundred to start. A couple hundred. I thought of the premium we'd paid all those years to keep this family covered if disaster came. Disaster came. It didn't cover me here. I'll figure it out, I said. Mom, he said softly, like he'd found a bruise and pressed. Don't be like that. I stood, my knees popped like old door hinges. I crossed to the desk and picked up the photo and put it face down because I couldn't be in 2 times at once. When do you want me out? I asked. He swallowed. The weekend? It gives us time to help you move. Us. The word was a wall I couldn't scale. All right, I said. The weekend. He stood and reached for me. I stepped back. It surprised us both. He put his hands in his pockets instead and nodded like we'd closed a deal. And that night, I packed in silence. 3 blouses, 1 pair of jeans, the sweater that still smelled faintly of smoke no matter what I did. I slid the stew from the freezer into my suitcase because it was mine, because my hands had made it, because one day I might want to remember I used to feed people. Around midnight, rain started. Soft at first, then heavy enough to make the gutters complain. I stood in the dark at the top of the stairs and listened to it, the way you listen to a train when you're deciding whether to leave a town. Downstairs, I made a call I never thought I'd make. Not Mark. Not Ashley. A number I'd carried in my wallet for 41 years in case of, what? Romance? Nostalgia? Catastrophe? The card was yellowed and soft at the edges. Henry Whitaker in clean blue ink. A Charlotte area code I still recognized. On the back, my own handwriting from the year 1984. Don't forget. My hands shook so badly I misdialed twice. On the 3rd try, the line rang once, twice, 3 times. Whitaker, a man said, low and steady, a voice lined with time. Henry, I said, and my voice broke on the first syllable. It's Nora Bennett. Silence, then a breath that sounded like relief. Nora, he said, my name a place to land. I shouldn't be calling, I rushed, panic stepping on the heels of humiliation. It's late. I'm sorry. My house burned down last week, and I've been staying with Mark. But it's not working, and I don't know where to. Tell me where you are, he said, calm as a harbor. I'm coming to get you. You don't have to. I want to, he said, no room for argument. Text me the address. I swallowed. It's Mark's place. I can meet you at the corner. I don't want to. I'll wait with my lights off, he said gently. 5 minutes away. We hung up. I stood in the kitchen and stared at the neat labels on the fridge like a museum of someone else's life. Breakfast, oat milk, meal prep, week 32, salad, arugula only. I left a note on the counter that said thank you because I was raised to say it even when it wasn't true. I wheeled the suitcase to the door and hesitated. I looked back once, at the lilies, at the spotless glass, at the framed photo where the 2 of them laughed under a vineyard arch. There was no space on that wall for a woman like me. The rain was cold and righteous. At the curb, a dark sedan idled. No headlights, just the faint glow of a dashboard. The passenger door opened before I reached it. Henry had gone silver at the temples, and the years had given his face the kind of strength you don't get in gyms. His eyes were the same, steady, amber, kind. He didn't ask questions. He stepped out into the rain, lifted my suitcase like it was light, and tucked me into warm leather and the smell of cedar and clean cotton. "Hi," I said, and it sounded like a prayer. "Hi," he said, and it sounded like home. Rain stitched the darkness into one long piece of cloth as Henry pulled away from the curb. The wipers beat a steady rhythm, left, left, like a metronome guiding my breath back into something human. I didn't speak for the first few blocks. I couldn't. All the words sat heavy in my throat. Shame, relief, gratitude, anger, each one a stone I didn't know how to place. Henry didn't press. The cabin was warm and faintly cedar-scented, the leather seat cupping me like a hand. He drove like men who've learned patience by living. No sudden movements, no theatrics, just confidence. At a red light, he glanced over not to examine me but to take a quiet inventory, like he was making sure I was still there. "You hungry?" he asked at last. I almost laughed. After days of swallowing pride and protein shakes that weren't mine to drink, the question felt like a kindness too big to hold. "I could eat," I said, voice raw. "There's a diner on Providence," he said. "Open late, best chicken and rice soup in the county. They'll know me." We didn't end up stopping. The rain softened and with it, the shaking in my hands. Hunger lost the argument to exhaustion. Maybe we go on," I said. "If that's all right." "It's more than all right," Henry replied. "Home is 20 minutes out." Home. The word registered somewhere low and tender. I bit my lip and looked out the window at the blurring world. Streetlights turned to comets, puddles ribboning along the curb. When I tried to thank him, the attempt collapsed into a sound that wasn't a word. He reached across the console, palm up, an offering. Not insisting, just present. I put my hand in his because it was the only thing that made sense. His fingers were warm, calloused in that elegant way men's hands can be when they've built things and signed papers and carried heavy boxes without asking anyone to notice. "Breathe, Nora," he said softly. "The worst of the night is over." Charlotte fell behind, the roads widening and the trees gathering into a quiet chorus as we headed toward the outskirts. We turned at a small brass plaque set into a stone pillar, Whitaker, tasteful and nearly hidden. The drive was long and curved through old oaks, their branches forming a canopy that glittered with rain. Landscape lights traced low arcs across hydrangeas the size of small moons. Somewhere far off I heard water, maybe a fountain, maybe a creek that hadn't learned to stop moving, even when life demanded stillness. The house revealed itself the way grace does, not all at once but in shapes that made sense only when you stepped closer. Not ostentatious, not that brittle, new money shine. Stone and aged wood, a wide front porch with rocking chairs and a swing that looked used. A front door that wanted to be knocked on, even if you had a key. Henry parked beneath the porte-cochere and cut the engine. For a moment, we sat in the soft aftermath. The ticking of the cooling car, rain settling into quieter conversations. "Ready?" he asked. "I don't know," I admitted. "That's all right," he said. "We'll pretend together." He came around to my side with an umbrella and opened my door like we were still 25, and I'd put on lipstick just to see him smile. He carried my suitcase as if it weighed nothing. When we stepped inside, warmth wrapped itself around me. The muted hum of an HVAC that had nothing to prove, the faint smell of lemon oil and something baking, the kind of order that felt lived in rather than performed. A hallway opened into a broad foyer. To the left, a study lined with books, spines in navy and burgundy, maps and old architectural monographs. To the right, a living room organized around a stone fireplace, logs stacked beside it like a promise. Farther back, a kitchen, generous and bright even at night, windows, a farmhouse sink, a bowl of green pears that looked like they'd been chosen one by one. "Welcome," Henry said simply, as if he'd built the entire place for this sentence. A woman emerged from the kitchen wiping her hands on a towel, mid-50s, steady eyes, the kind of presence that made a house exhale. "Mr. Whitaker," she said, surprise turning to a knowing smile. "You told me not to wait up." "This is Rosa," Henry said. "She runs the place." "Rosa, this is Nora Bennett, an old friend." Rosa stepped forward, kind rather than curious. "You're soaked," she said. "I'll put on tea, chamomile or mint. Whatever's easiest," I managed. "Nothing about tea is difficult," she said, and I felt myself like a picture being set straight on a wall. Henry showed me the guest suite as Rosa's kettle began to sing. The room was at the back of the house, corner windows looking out to the dark outline of gardens. A quilt in colors that didn't apologize, indigo, russet, cream, An upholstered chair angled toward a small bookcase and a reading lamp that waited to be switched on. Fresh flowers in a modest vase, white ranunculus, as if someone believed softness could be built into a room. A bathroom, marble and quiet, with towels folded in thirds, not halves. "I'll get you something to sleep in," Henry said. "The laundry will take your things in the morning." I touched the bedspread. "Henry," I started and stopped. Gratitude kept tripping over disbelief. He misread my silence in the gentlest way. "This is temporary till you find your footing," he said. "As long as temporary needs to be. No clocks on this." I nodded, the relief almost violent. "Thank you." He smiled, eyes creasing at the corners. "I'll bring tea to the kitchen. Come when you're ready." When he left, I sat on the edge of the bed and began to cry quietly, in that undramatic way grief prefers. Not the despair of being turned away, something else, the body undoing tight knots. I pressed the heels of my hands to my eyes until stars showed up behind my lids, and then I washed my face with water that knew how to be warm. The kitchen was a soft pool of light. Rosa had set out a tray, 2 mugs, a small honey jar, a plate of butter cookies that tasted like the childhoods we wish we'd had. Henry leaned against the counter in a navy sweater, sleeves pushed back, as if he were practicing comfort rather than wearing it. "Chamomile with honey," Rosa announced, "and toast with a little butter, because soup this late will only anchor you to your worries." She patted my shoulder with physicianly certainty. "Eat, then sleep. The rest can knock on the door tomorrow." When she left, Henry slid a mug toward me. "She runs my life, whether I ask or not," he said. "I've learned to be grateful." "I plan to take notes," I said, softly. I wrapped both hands around the mug. My fingers had finally stopped shaking. "Your home, I searched for a word that wasn't about money. It's quiet in the right ways." "That was the assignment," he said. "I built this place after my father died, too big at the time. Or maybe I was too small for it." He shrugged. "Not arrogance, not false modesty, just data." I kept adding rooms for possibilities. A pause. Possibilities have a habit of arriving late. I broke a cookie, and it gave under my fingers with a sigh. I used to make shortbread at Christmas. Mark would eat them in threes like it was a rule. His face gentled. "You can bake here whenever you like. Fill this place with smells." We were quiet for a minute, sipping tea that tasted of fields. Rain ticked at the windows. Every now and then, a car hissed past on the far road like a thought you didn't need to keep. "You look exactly like yourself," Henry said finally. "That's a generous lie." "It's the only kind I tell," he said. "You have the same steadiness. The way you listen, it's not interrogating, it's gathering. People talk themselves into new lives around you." I let the compliment sit where it landed. "And you," I said, "still speak like a man who has made rooms for other people and means to keep them." He took that in as if it were medicine. "I always hoped you'd see me this way," he said. Not a plea, a confession. The clock on the stove hummed into the next minute. We let it pass. He cleared his throat. "Tomorrow, we'll call your insurance. We'll get you a notebook and a folder with dividers. People underestimate the power of labeled tabs." "I don't," I said, managing a smile. "I know you don't," he replied, smiling back. "We'll also get you a phone that isn't pretending to be fine. Cancel what needs canceling, forward mail, call your bank, and we'll go buy your lot." He said it carefully. "Only if you want. I'll be there if you do." "I think I need to see it," I said. "Just once, in daylight." "Then we will." We finished our tea. I ate the toast because Rosa would have been disappointed if I hadn't. Henry rinsed the plates and arranged them on the rack with a neatness that made me feel less alone in my habits. At the doorway, I hesitated. There's a calculus women do, even inside safety. Is it too much to say thank you again? Will it make this fragile peace feel like debt? "Thank you," I said anyway, because I'd rather owe gratitude than silence. He didn't flinch. "You're not a favor, Nora," he said. "You're a fact, and facts are easy to live with." The guest room welcomed me back as if it had been told to. I turned on the reading lamp, its light making a polite circle on the quilt. Someone, Rosa, surely, had placed a cotton nightgown on the bed, tags still on. A small basket sat on the dresser with essentials that made me feel embarrassingly seen. A toothbrush, unscented soap, moisturizer, a comb, a pair of warm socks. I changed and brushed my hair till it obeyed. In the mirror, a woman I knew and didn't know looked back. Cheeks a little hollow from the week, eyes less hunted than they'd been at the curb. I pressed my fingertips to the glass, just to be sure she was real. Before turning off the light, I opened the nightstand drawer, expecting emptiness. There was a single paperback inside, A Gentleman in Moscow. I laughed under my breath. A man under house arrest who learns that confinement can be a life if you decide to love what's inside the walls. If Henry had placed it there on purpose, he'd earned his reputation for elegant gestures. If he hadn't, fate had decided to contribute a footnote. I slid between cool sheets and realized I didn't have to brace for footsteps in the hallway or whispers about boundaries. The house held itself around me. No performance, no pretense. For the first time since the fire, sleep arrived like a friend who knows where the spare key is kept. Morning came with a quiet so thorough I could hear birds negotiating the rain's retreat. I woke not to panic, but to the comfortable discovery of a soft pillow. It took a second to remember where I was. Then it took another to be grateful all over again. There was a robe on the hook, thick, white, hotel plush. I wrapped myself in it and padded to the window. Gardens stretched out in tiers, a gravel path threading through boxwoods, an herb bed neat but not militaristic, a small greenhouse with panes that winked in the new light. Beyond the trees, the suggestion of water, a pond maybe tamed but still itself. I found the kitchen by following the smell of coffee that knew its purpose. Rosa stood at the stove, coaxing eggs into silk with a wooden spoon. Henry sat at the island in shirt sleeves, reading a paper made of actual paper, not a screen. His glasses were low on his nose. The ordinary intimacy of that sight made my throat ache with a sweetness that worried me with its speed. "Morning," he said, folding the paper in a neat quarter. "Coffee?" "Yes, please," I said. "Smells like I might turn human." Rosa slid a plate in front of me. Scrambled eggs, toast, sliced pears glossed with lemon. "We start with simple," she said. "Fancy comes later if it must." I ate without apology. Between bites, we assembled a plan with the precision of a gentle campaign. Henry's assistant would call the insurance adjuster and schedule a site review. Rosa would take me to pick up essentials and a sensible phone. Henry and I would drive to my lot after lunch. If I couldn't manage the whole thing, we'd try again the next day. Nothing urgent except my dignity. "Also," Henry added, "a lawyer friend will look over whatever the insurance company puts in front of you. They're decent people, but paper can forget to be kind." "Henry," I said cautiously, "I don't want to turn your life into a project." "Then don't," he answered. "Let it be a life. Lives overlap. That's the best part." We cleaned up together, our motions coalescing into a choreography I recognized. The small domestic dance that says I see you, and I mean to make this place easier for your hands. On the way to town, Henry drove the slow way, the route that let the city offer itself without hurry. He narrated neighborhoods like a docent, plazas built by men whose names had become addresses, the old textile mill that was now apartments with polished concrete floors, the bakery where the owner still put flour on her face because tourists like to photograph effort. He wasn't showing off. He was sharing. "Here's where I have lived," he seemed to say. "I'd like you to live here with me, in the manner that suits you." At the remains of my house, the air held a faint tang of wet soot and something metallic. Ash had settled into the shape of a broken memory. The fire investigator's tape fluttered. The mailbox, stubbornly upright, wore rain like a purposeful accessory. I took one step, then another, until my feet found the place where the living room used to be. Henry kept his distance, a steady figure to the side, letting the scene and my body speak their private language. "I thought I'd fall apart," I said. My voice sounded like it was coming from farther away, an echo returning from a past that had learned its boundaries. "But it just looks over, like a book I finished." "Some endings are merciful," he said, "even when they arrive like thieves." Something glinted in the mess, a small corner of silver. I crouched, fingers blackening, and pulled free a picture frame. Mark at 8, missing tooth, bat too big. The glass had cracked into a spider web. With the bat crossing his chest, he looked like a knight under a spell that had finally snapped. "I grabbed one photo on the way out," I murmured. "I thought I saved him. Looks like he saved himself." Henry took a cloth from his pocket. Of course he'd brought a cloth, and I handed him the frame. He wrapped it carefully, as if it were new and not a survivor. "We'll clean it up," he said. "Give the boy a second chance at being 8. We didn't stay long. Grief is greedy when you feed it too much at once. In the car, I let my head rest against the window, watching the old street recede. I expected self-reproach. It didn't come. The house had been faithful. It wasn't its fault that wires age and alarms go quiet and sons become men with gates around their schedules. Back at Henry's, Rosa had made soup, the honest kind, chicken and rice with lemon. She set it on the table with a loaf of bread that split along its seam like a long exhale. We ate, and no one asked me to summarize my pain for their understanding. The house kept its quiet. I kept mine. In the afternoon, Henry took me to his study to show me the desk he'd cleared. "For you," he said, "not a shrine, a station." The surface held a new notebook, tab dividers, a pen that told the truth when it wrote, a small vase of white flowers that refused drama. I sat and wrote the first list I'd written in days that wasn't a survival checklist. At the top, I put what comes next, and beneath it, call adjuster, bank appointment, get copies of documents, cancel utilities, thank Mrs. Porter, breathe, bake shortbread. Henry paused at the door. Rosa says the kitchen is yours tomorrow morning if you want it. I do, I said, surprising myself at the certainty. I want this place to smell like butter and sugar, even if only for an hour. Then it will, he replied. As evening sloped in, the rain returned, this time gentle, like a memory that had learned to knock. We sat by the fire, he in the leather chair with the paper, me on the sofa with a blanket like a cloud. I told him about Daniel, not too much, not to compare, but to set the furniture of my past in its proper rooms. He told me about his parents, about a first business that almost failed, about the house he built too big for the man he was then. Somewhere between a story about a botched ribbon cutting and my confession that I'd never learned to whistle, we both realized we were laughing for the first time in days. It sounded like two people learning a dialect that had been theirs all along. When I went to bed, Rosa had placed a card on the nightstand, her tidy handwriting in blue ink, warm bath salts on the shelf. Use them. Rest is medicine. I did as I was told. The water carried away ash I hadn't noticed clinging along my hairline. After, I slipped into bed with the paperback and read a few pages about a gentleman finding liberty inside limits. I turned off the light and listened as the house edited the day into quieter sentences. The settling of wood, the distant tick of the porch swing against its chain. Before sleep found me, I said a small prayer that was not a request but a thank you. For rooms that offer themselves, for hands that don't hurry you, for second chances that arrive dressed like ordinary evenings. Outside, the rain wrote its soft signature across Henry Whitaker's roof, and inside, for the first time since my life had burned to the ground, I felt not saved exactly, but kept. It was nearly 2 weeks after the fire when the past decided it wasn't done with me. The morning had started like any other. Soft light, coffee on the porch, Henry reading the paper while Rosa pruned the roses. Peace had become a language I was learning again, slow and melodic. But that peace cracked the moment I saw a car pull up the drive, tires crunching against gravel that had never known such impatience. A silver SUV. I didn't need to see the driver to know who it was. Mark. I froze halfway to the porch steps, heart thudding in a way that reminded me I was still somebody's mother, even if I'd failed at the part where you get to feel proud. Henry looked up from his paper. He didn't need an explanation. He folded the pages with precision, set them down, and said quietly, "You want me to stay?" I hesitated. "Please." The car door slammed harder than it needed to. Mark strode up the path, all pressed anger and designer confidence, the kind of posture men learn when they're scared of appearing small. Ashley wasn't with him. I didn't know whether to be relieved or disappointed. "Mom," he said, his voice sharp enough to cut through the morning air. "Why didn't you answer your phone?" I blinked. "Because you stopped calling it, Mark." He flinched but recovered. "I heard from Mrs. Porter. She said you moved in with some man." His eyes flicked to Henry, standing calm but firm on the porch beside me. "Is that him?" "This is Henry Whitaker," I said, steadying my voice. "An old friend." "Old friend?" Mark repeated, the word twisting in his mouth like a joke. "You mean the guy who picked you up from some cheap hotel after you ran out on us?" Henry's tone was calm, not defensive. "She didn't run, she was asked to leave." Mark's eyes snapped to him. "You don't get to." "Mark?" I interrupted softly. "Please." He turned back to me, his expression wobbling between fury and something far smaller. "Hurt, maybe. You could have told me. You just vanished. Do you have any idea how that made me look?" "How it made you look?" I repeated. "Mark, my house burned to the ground. I slept in your office for 3 days until Ashley started labeling the fridge." His jaw clenched. It wasn't like that." "It was exactly like that," I said quietly. "I saw it with my own eyes." He ran a hand through his hair, the same gesture he used when he was 16 and trying to lie about report cards. "I was going to ask you back," he muttered. "I called. You didn't pick up." "By then," I said, "I'd already learned what your kind of welcome feels like." Henry stayed silent, his presence like a steady wall behind me. Not shielding, anchoring. Mark took a step closer. "You've known this guy, 2 weeks? And you're living here now? What if he's taking advantage of you?" Henry smiled faintly. "I assure you, Mr. Bennett, I have more to lose than your mother does to give." "That's not the point," Mark snapped. "You don't know her. You don't know how." "How what?" I asked, voice trembling not from fear but exhaustion. "How fragile, how inconvenient. You don't get to rewrite me, Mark. I was your home long before you built one that wouldn't have me in it." Silence. Even the birds seemed to hold their breath. Henry spoke softly. "Why don't we take this inside?" Mark ignored him. His anger had nowhere to go now except inward. "You chose him over your family," he said, and I could hear the child in the man, confused and betrayed. "I didn't choose anyone," I said. "I chose not to beg for a place at my own son's table. That did it." The words hit him like truth always does. Slow at first, then sharp. His shoulders sagged. He looked at Henry, then back at me, eyes wet but refusing to surrender. I thought I was protecting my life, he said finally. Ashley said we needed space. I thought it was temporary. So did I whispered. For a moment neither of us spoke. Then Henry, ever the diplomat, placed 2 cups of untouched coffee on the porch railing. Drink before it gets cold, he said. Conversations like this go better when something warm is in your hands. It wasn't an order. It was grace. Mark hesitated, then took 1 cup. Thanks, he muttered. Henry nodded once, the truce wordless but real. Mark looked around, the garden, the old trees, the house that seemed to breathe without effort. You built all this? He asked, as if it explained why his mother might prefer being here. Henry shook his head. Built it, yes, but it only started feeling alive when your mother arrived. Mark's throat worked, and for the first time he looked at me not as a problem, but as a person. You seem better, he said quietly. I'm healing, I replied. That's all. He nodded. The fight had drained from him, replaced by something almost boyish. Ashley wants to apologize, he said after a while. She said she handled things wrong. We both did. That's good, I said softly. Apologies are meant to be spoken, not just thought about. He looked down. Would you ever come by? For dinner, maybe? I smiled faintly. One day, when the table feels like mine again. Mark nodded, understanding more than words could hold. You deserve better than what I gave you. I already have better, I said, glancing at Henry, who didn't pretend not to hear. When Mark left, the air didn't feel heavy anymore. It felt clean, like rain after fire. Henry stood beside me, watching the SUV disappear down the drive. You handled that beautifully, he said. No, I said, exhaling. I just didn't run. He smiled. That's what beauty looks like, Nora, standing still. I turned to him, realizing that for the first time in years, I wasn't defined by what I'd lost, but by what I'd chosen to keep. Dignity, honesty, and the small courage to begin again. And as the morning sun spilled across the porch, warming the cup in my hands, I whispered to myself the words that had once felt impossible to believe. I'm home. The morning after Mark drove away felt like a room after company leaves. Quiet, a little messy with feeling, but breathable. I washed the 2 coffee cups by hand, though the dishwasher stood ready. I wanted the warm water, the small circles of a sponge, the ordinary rhythm of care. Henry came in, loosened tie over his shoulder, he'd been on a call already, and kissed the crown of my head like it was the most natural thing in the world. What does today look like? He asked. Like butter and sugar, I said, and maybe a list that doesn't scare me. Then we'll need both ovens, he replied, smiling. Rosa, the general requests artillery. Rosa, who could hear through walls when kindness was mentioned, materialized with a notebook and a pencil tucked behind her ear. Supply run first, she declared. Good flour, European butter, almond extract, not imitation, and a new apron for you, Nora. A nice one that says you mean it. I laughed, surprised by how easily it came. Yes, ma'am. We went to the Saturday market the slow way, windows cracked to let in spring and people. Charlotte was dressed for company, azaleas on fire, dogwoods like confetti. At the market, tents bloomed like bright sails, local honey, old man peaches, a woman selling sourdough that looked like it had risen to a hymn. Rosa ran into a farmer she knew and negotiated strawberries with the gravitas of a peace accord. Henry carried the bags like a myth, the sort of man who makes vendors stand a little taller because they recognize an honest customer. I threaded between them, trying on belonging the way you try a cardigan and realize it has been yours all along. At the spice stall, I found almond extract in a dark bottle and vanilla that smelled like patience. Rosa placed both in my hands. The world can be cruel, she said, but a cookie can still be holy. At the apron rack, Henry reached for a blue one with thin white stripes. This looks like work done well, he said. Not pink, I teased. He considered. You don't need pink to be soft. I said nothing because sometimes the right answer is to let yourself be seen. Back home, the kitchen felt like a stage that had been waiting for its lead to arrive. I set up stations on butcher block like a field commander, mixing to the left, rolling in the center, cooling racks on the island. Rosa cleared with the efficiency of a woman who believed in momentum. Henry opened the back door to the screened porch, letting in a breeze that carried bird song and the faint memory of rain. I sifted flour, creamed butter with sugar until it went pale and light, remembering the exact knob of the mixer where the texture turns from grainy to silk. I added egg yolk, a whisper of almond, a faithful slash of vanilla. The dough came together obediently. I wrapped it in parchment, patted it like a sleeping thing, and set it to rest. While we waited, Henry brought his laptop to the kitchen table. Insurance adjuster emailed, he said. They'll honor the full claim on the structure, minus the deductible. Contents will need an inventory. My inventoried life burned, I said, but not bitterly. I'll do what I can. We'll do it together, he corrected. Rosa and I can help you reconstruct. Photographs from friends, receipts from old emails. We'll make a list long enough to satisfy the ledger and short enough to let you breathe." I nodded, grateful. "Mark texted," I added, surprised at my own calm. "He said Ashley wants to apologize in person." Henry's hands paused over the keyboard. "Do you want that?" "I think I need it," I said. "Not for permission, for punctuation." "Then we'll make tea," he said. "Lavender if it's peace, mint if it needs strength." Rosa, without looking up from polishing the lemon bowl, said, "We'll do both." We fell into a working silence, the gentle kind where none of us disappeared. When the dough was ready, I rolled it to a 1/4 inch and cut rounds with my grandmother's cutter, salvaged from a drawer I'd emptied before the fire without knowing why. The metal was dull and dented. It did the job perfectly. The first tray went in. The house started to change. Butter announced itself, then sugar followed. One of those scents that dissolves years and sends a message through open windows. Something good is happening here. Henry took a call on the porch, his voice low and warm. I heard phrases that used to belong to other lives. Phase 2 build? Sightline agreement. Let's do right by them. And marveled at a man who could make success sound like a promise rather than a weapon. The timer chimed. I pulled the tray. Shortbread, pale and delicate at the edges, the center still soft. Rosa hovered with a wooden spoon under the guise of adjusting airflow. "You never have to explain wanting the first one," I told her, and she grinned, wicked and holy. We cooled the cookies as much as patience allowed, which is to say, not enough, and ate one each in the kind of silence reserved for churches and ocean cliffs. I closed my eyes. The crumb was tender, butter blooming without argument, almond at the back like an old friend who sits at the edge of the party and makes everything feel safe. Henry took his first bite and leaned against the counter like the floor had shifted into something kinder. "If you needed a reason to stay," he said, "this is a constitutional amendment." "Dangerous talk," I replied. "Next, I'll be running a bake sale out of your driveway." He didn't blink. "Why not? People will come for cookies and leave with courage. We'll call it Rebuilding Grace." The name landed like a bird on my palm, light, alive, choosing to stay. "That was my middle name," I said, "Grace." "I know," he said quietly, and my heart did something foolish and accurate. We started small. Rosa called the church office and asked if their fellowship hall needed desserts for the midweek supper. "We'll donate," she said, "and if people want to pay, Nora will put it toward a family who needs a small miracle." The secretary said they'd had 3 families in mind for months and no miracles to offer. "Bring whatever you like," she added. "I'll make sure it disappears." I baked for 2 days like a woman with a job. Lemon bars that cut clean and tart. Banana bread with walnuts. Henry shelled himself while we talked about nothing and everything. Shortbread, of course, in 3 flavors. Plain, lavender sugar, and dipped in dark chocolate, because some pain requires bold sweetness. Rosa labeled tins with her tidy hand. Henry loaded the car as if the cargo were fragile hope, which it was. At the church, the hall smelled like coffee and casserole. Volunteers in aprons moved with practiced choreography. Lay down forks, refill pitchers, stack plates at the end of the line. We set out the desserts. People smiled with their whole faces. An old man told me the lemon bars tasted like his mother's kitchen in 1959. A little girl asked if she could have the fancy cookie and held it reverently like a found shell. The treasurer pressed an envelope into my hand. "Donations," she whispered. "We'll do this as long as you'll bake." On the drive home, Henry kept one hand on the wheel and one palm open on the console. I filled it without thinking. "What are you thinking?" he asked. "That I might be useful again," I said, surprise threading my voice. "You never stopped," he answered. "You just weren't being seen." The next week, Rosa propped her phone in the kitchen and recorded my hands as I made shortbread. "We'll post to the neighborhood board," she said. "No dancing, just the recipe in your voice." "My voice is older than the internet," I protested. "Exactly why people will listen," she replied. "We are starved for voices that have lived." We filmed in 1 take. "Butter at room temperature," I said, not because recipes demand it, but because softness works better with softness. I explained why I add almond, to remind the tongue of celebration, and why I never overmix. We ruin more things by insisting than by trusting. Rosa posted it with a caption that embarrassed me. "Rebuilding Grace, Episode 1, Shortbread for Survivors." We expected a few neighbors to comment. By evening, the video had traveled like a good rumor. Orders didn't flood in, they strolled. Enough for me to bake every morning, answer messages after lunch, and still sit with Henry on the porch before dinner. Enough to donate trays to the shelter Rosa supported. Enough to put an envelope on the church secretary's desk each week with a note, "For whoever can't afford the month." And Henry insisted we do it properly. He called his lawyer friend, who helped me set up a small LLC, Rebuilding Grace Kitchen, with a separate bank account so gifts didn't blur with groceries. You can keep it small or grow it, Henry said, but build it on purpose. I ordered business cards that felt like a handshake. White, simple, my name in black, the word grace in a soft blue that made people breathe differently. One afternoon, as I pulled a tray of chocolate-dipped shortbread from the fridge, Mark texted, "Dinner next Sunday? Just me. Ashley wants to come the week after to apologize. I'll bring dessert if you're tired of baking." I stared at the screen long enough for Rosa to notice. "What does the boy say?" she asked. "That he wants dinner," I said, "and that Ashley wants to apologize the week after." Rosa nodded. Not triumphant, not suspicious. Just glad. "We'll set 2 places next Sunday," she said, "and we'll leave the 3rd chair empty on purpose. It's good for people to see the space they hope to fill." I smiled. "Mint tea," I said. "Strength." "Lavender too," she replied. Peace is not the absence of strength, it is strength behaving itself. On Thursday, the insurance check for the structure arrived. Henry opened the envelope and set it between us, not like an answer, but like a tool. "This will rebuild a house," he said, "but what do you want to build?" Once the question would have sent me into plans and permits. Now it sent me into imagination. I pictured a small, sunlit kitchen, shelves not to show off, but to reach easily. A table big enough for elbows and stories. A porch with 2 chairs and a third, because you never know who will need to sit down. "I don't think I want the same house back," I said. "I want a place that fits my life now, not the life I'm pretending to still have." Henry's eyes softened in that way that made my chest ache with relief. "Then that's what we'll do," he said. "We'll find a piece of land that wants to hold you without owning you." We drove that weekend, not far, just enough to meet parcels of earth like potential friends. A small lot near a stand of pines, another with a view of a community garden. The third sat at the end of a quiet lane where children chalked galaxies on asphalt and old women brought folding chairs to the shade at 4 o'clock. I stood at the edge of that lot and felt something in my bones say yes. Henry looked at me and didn't ask. "We'll call in the morning," he said. "Not a big house," I said, "but a brave one," he smiled. Bravery scales beautifully. I roasted chicken Sunday. Came like a test I wanted to pass. I set the table in Henry's dining room, linen runner, white plates that didn't fear for flowers at the garden arranged like they'd fallen into grace. I roasted chicken because some traditions deserve to be rescued. I made a salad that was more than apology and less than performance. And because I am who I am now, I plated 3 shortbread cookies on a small dish at the center. Plain, lavender, and chocolate, a trinity of mercies. Mark arrived on time and alone. He stood in the foyer and looked around like he was entering a story he'd only heard in fragments. He hugged me first, awkward, earnest, longer than either of us expected. Then he shook Henry's hand like a man admitting someone else had done a hard thing he couldn't. Dinner was simple. Conversation was simpler. We didn't litigate the past. We acknowledged it like a weather report, and then talked about what we'd do if the forecast changed. Mark asked about the market, about the church suppers, about baking videos. He asked Henry how to tell if a man was doing right by his own success. Henry answered the way he knows how, plainly, without hiding behind jargon. "You can count profit," he said, "but you measure decency. People tell you the truth if you stay quiet long enough." Before he left, Mark stood in the doorway, keys in his hand like a truce flag. "Next week," he said cautiously, "Ashley would like to come by. No expectations, just to say what needs saying." "I'll make tea," I said. "She can take it with honey or straight." After he drove off, I went to the kitchen and leaned against the counter, breathing like a woman who had just learned a new word. "What word?" Henry asked, rinsing the plates. "Possible," I said. "It feels different when your heart believes it." He dried his hands and came to stand in front of me, close enough that I could see the gold flecks in his eyes. "What else feels possible?" "Everything I forgot to want," I said. We didn't rush the moment to a declaration. We let it be what it was, a good man and a good woman at a clean counter, the dishwasher humming like an old hymn, the future not promised, but politely waiting in the next room. Before bed, I opened my new Rebuilding Grace notebook and wrote 3 lines. Today I fed people and wasn't emptied. Today my son came hungry and left less so. Today I chose a life that fits the size of my hope. I closed the book and set it on the desk. Henry cleared for me, my station. Outside, the porch swing tapped its small punctuation against the chain. Inside, the house held us both easily, not because we needed saving, but because we'd agreed to stay. And in that simple agreement, I felt the shape of grace I'd been rebuilding all along. Not a recipe, not a business, but a way of standing in the world that said, "I am here. I am still good. Come eat." The next Sunday carried the nervous stillness of a theater before curtain. The house was spotless, too quiet even for comfort. Henry moved with his usual patience, polishing glasses that were already perfect, setting napkins as if preparing for a treaty, not dinner. I knew he was doing it for me, giving shape to my trembling. Ashley was coming. Rosa lit a candle, one with lavender and cedar, for peace, she said. Peace needs help entering a room sometimes. She placed a vase of fresh hydrangeas on the table and left early, sensing that apologies need as few witnesses as possible. At 6:02, the doorbell rang. Henry looked at me. You ready? As I'll ever be, I said. He opened the door. Ashley stood there, smaller than I remembered. Her usual sharp edges, perfect lipstick, heels like weapons, had softened. She wore a navy dress and held a small paper bag. Her hands shook just enough to make her human. Hi, Nora, she said quietly. Come in, I replied, stepping aside. The smell of rosemary chicken greeted her before I did. I'd cooked the same dish I used to make for family dinners years ago, out of habit, or maybe defiance. We sat at the table. Henry poured wine, his calm a steady drumbeat under the silence. I brought something, Ashley said, placing the paper bag on the table. It's pie, from the bakery near our house. You used to like it. Thank you. She nodded, twisting the napkin in her lap. Mark told me what happened, about how things ended. I've been replaying it all week. I just wanted to say I was wrong. The words landed clumsy but sincere. I didn't realize how cruel I sounded when I asked for privacy. She winced. That word, it wasn't about you. It was about me wanting control. I saw you as a reminder of everything I hadn't yet learned to handle. I listened. My fingers traced the rim of my glass. You made me feel like a stranger in my own son's house, I said softly. That's not easy to forget. I know, Ashley whispered. And I don't expect forgiveness tonight. I just didn't want silence to be the last thing between us. Henry set his fork down gently. Silence is heavy, he said, but it's lighter when shared. We ate, slowly, words coming between bites. She asked about my baking project. I told her about rebuilding Grace. Her eyes filled when I mentioned the donations to families who'd lost homes. You turned loss into something beautiful, she said. I just followed the recipe life left me, I replied. After dinner, she helped me clear the table. In the kitchen, we stood side by side at the sink, two women rinsing the past off plates. I used to think strength meant control, Ashley said, drying a dish. But it's this, isn't it? Doing the hard thing standing here? Yes, I said, and knowing when to stop breaking what's already broken. When she left, she hugged me, a real one this time, trembling and true. Mark's lucky, she whispered. You raised a man who can change. After the door closed, Henry brought tea to the porch. How do you feel? He asked. Like something unclenched, I said. We sat in the glow of the porch light, sipping quietly. Somewhere beyond the trees, a train wailed, a sound of leaving that didn't hurt anymore. Henry reached for my hand. You've rebuilt more than a kitchen, Nora. I smiled, watching steam rise from my cup like prayer. Maybe. But this time I'm not rebuilding alone. He squeezed my hand, firm and sure. The candle Rosa had left flickered behind the window, burning slow and steady, like the peace that had finally found its place. 3 months after the night of Ashley's visit, Henry and I stood on a patch of earth that would soon become something more. The morning sun cast long golden stripes across the clearing, catching the silver strands in his hair. I could still smell the dew on the grass, the faint sweetness of pine. This is it, Henry said, pressing the key into my palm. Not a house key, just a small brass one he'd carried on his ring. For the gate, you should open it first. The gate creaked softly, the kind of sound that felt like memory being rewritten. Beyond it, the foundation had already been laid, clean lines of concrete and steel, ready to carry a dream that had survived fire and loss. I ran my hand over the rough edge, cold but promising. It feels smaller than I imagined, I said. That's how peace feels, Henry replied. Compact, strong, enough. We walked the perimeter together, marking invisible rooms. Here, the kitchen that would smell of sugar and lemon again. There, a porch where morning coffee would meet the world. A single guest room, for Mark and Ashley, if they ever found their way back again. And in the center, the space Henry insisted on calling the hearth. A fire took the last one, he said softly. Let's make sure this one keeps you warm. When construction began, I thought I'd be content to watch, but I couldn't stay away. I learned the names of tools, the rhythm of hammers, the difference between walnut and cedar beams. Henry teased that I'd missed my calling. Rosa brought lunch every day, sandwiches wrapped in wax paper and iced tea in mason jars, and the workers called her La Generala. In the evenings, Henry and I sat on folding chairs where the porch would be. Some nights we spoke of details, paint colors, flooring, light fixtures. Other nights we said nothing, content with the hum of crickets and the far-off glow of fireflies. It wasn't grand romance. It was something deeper, gentler, a partnership shaped by quiet respect. By the end of summer, the walls stood proud and whole. When the roof went up, Rosa brought a bouquet of wildflowers and tied it to the beam. "We're blessings," she said. "And because every house deserves a little beauty it didn't earn." On the last day of construction, as the workers packed their tools, Henry led me to the front steps. The porch boards were still warm from the afternoon sun. He handed me a small envelope with my name written in his careful hand. Inside was a deed. My name, not ours. I looked up, startled. "Henry," he shook his head. "It's your house, Nora? I just helped it find you." I tried to speak but couldn't. The air between us filled with the sound of the wind through unfinished curtains. Finally I whispered, "You built me a future." "No," he said, smiling. "You built it. I just carried the bricks." That night, I stood alone in the new kitchen, still smelling of sawdust and new beginnings. The moonlight spilled across the counter, silvering the edges of everything it touched. I placed a single shortbread cookie on a plate and poured a cup of tea. Home. This time, it wasn't where I came from or what I'd lost. It was what I'd chosen, what I'd learned to rebuild with steady hands and an open heart. And as I turned off the light and stepped out to the porch where Henry waited, I realized that love, at its truest, doesn't rescue you. It hands you a hammer and says, "Let's build." The house was finished by autumn, and with it, something inside me finally settled. The kitchen, wide, sunlit, and always smelling of vanilla, became the heart of everything. Rosa joked that the walls themselves had learned to rise with the dough. Henry said the laughter made the beams stronger. Every Saturday, I held a small baking class for women from town, widows, single mothers, retirees who needed a reason to get out of bed. We needed not just dough, but silence, grief, and loneliness until everything softened. The sign above the door read, "Rebuilding Grace Kitchen." Underneath it, in Henry's handwriting, were 4 words, "Hope rises in heat." Mark came often now, sometimes to help with deliveries, sometimes just to sit at the counter and eat warm cookies like he used to when he was 10. Ashley joined too, quietly, humbly, and when she smiled, it no longer carried apology, only peace. One evening, after the last student had left, Henry stayed behind to clean. I was labeling cookie boxes when he set something on the counter, a small velvet box, dark blue, almost shy. "I figured," he said softly, "if we've already built a home, we might as well name it together." Inside was a simple gold band, warm against the light. I didn't cry. I just laughed, the kind of laughter that knows how far it's traveled to exist. "Yes," I said. He slipped the ring on my finger, kissed my flour-dusted hand, and whispered, "You finally came home." Outside, the oven light glowed through the window like a heartbeat. And for the first time, I understood that legacy isn't what we leave behind, it's what we build while we're still here. One small act of grace at a time. If someone had told me that the worst day of my life would one day become my greatest blessing, I would have laughed in disbelief. But standing here now, in this kitchen filled with warmth, with Henry humming off-key and flour dusting the air like snow, I know it's true. The fire that destroyed my old house didn't just burn wood and walls, it burned away everything that no longer served me. Fear, guilt, and the illusion that love must be earned. From the ashes, something gentler rose, quiet, steady, certain. Every morning I watched the first sunlight spill across the counter, touching the ring on my hand, the same gold that catches the laughter in Henry's eyes. Sometimes I still think about that night, the flames, the smoke, the sound of breaking glass. And I realize now, that was life breaking me open, so something new could grow. Mark visits on Sundays. He brings coffee and stories. Ashley helps with the baking classes. They still argue over recipes sometimes, but their laughter fills the room like forgiveness in motion. Rosa says the house smells like heaven. I think it smells like survival. I keep a framed photograph above the hearth. The old house before the fire, the new one after, and in between, a small scrap of burned wood that I couldn't throw away. It reminds me that destruction isn't the opposite of creation. It's part of it. So when people ask how I rebuilt after losing everything, I just smile and tell them the truth. With love, with patience, and a handful of flour. And as the oven hums and the world outside carries on, I whisper to the quiet, I finally came home.